Would I have put my life on the line to join the resistance and put my own family at risk? Would I have hidden my Jewish neighbors in my home? I'm standing in front of you, ladies and gentlemen, as someone who knows what it is to live under a totalitarian regime, a barbaric regime, to have packed bags in the night, spoken in hushed tones, and lived in fear. My family and I escaped the tyranny and persecution of Saddam Hussein against the Kurdish people and came to the United Kingdom when I was 11 years old. We found a safe home in the United Kingdom, a country that has given us everything. And I've seen firsthand how our classrooms can be weapons against prejudice. You will have already heard from my colleagues from Malta, and we'll hear from them again from North Macedonia and from Croatia, about the vital role that teachers must play in educating young people about the Holocaust. It is through them that we keep the memory of the evil events of the Second World War alive in our minds, so that future generations of children can learn from them and not forget. Learning from history about the consequences of these events is something we in the United Kingdom have been actively pursuing for a number of years. The Holocaust is the single statutory event in our secondary history curriculum and has been a core topic since 1991 that all children have to study. We have allocated funding for the Centre for Holocaust Education at University College London to develop training resources for teachers to help them teach about the Holocaust in a knowledgeable and sensitive manner, in the knowledge that soon we will have no living eyewitnesses left to tell their stories. We fund the Holocaust Educational Trust's Lessons from Auschwitz program, which takes sixth formers from our country and teachers to visit the camp, and have been doing so since 1999. Given the times we live in, these visits have been virtual because of COVID over the last year, which has still, I think, been important because it has enabled young people to visit Auschwitz and to learn about the Holocaust virtually. They've been and continue to be a life-changing experience for children in our country. But none of us, and that's the question, can fail to be aware that societies around the world, and unfortunately, we in the United Kingdom are no different, are still experiencing anti-Semitism, racism, and intolerance. These are still with us, my friends, and in the United Kingdom, anti-Semitism, or indeed any form of religious or racial intolerance, is something we take very, very seriously. It has no place in our society. And as a government, we are clear that this racism is completely unacceptable and must be stamped out from our classrooms or campuses, wherever and whenever it occurs. This requires, and this is something that I think we all need to think about, a sustained and committed campaign. Anti-Semitism often presents differently to other forms of racism. Nothing less than a zero tolerance approach will suffice. We expect all our schools to challenge this kind of behavior and to take a strong stand against all forms of bullying and discrimination. We launched the Education Against Hate website in 2016 to provide teachers, school leaders, and parents with the kind of guidance and support they need to challenge radical views and keep children safe, including from online extremist influences. We fund a network of education officers, people who play a key role in supporting our schools across the country to help safeguard any young person who might be vulnerable to radicalization. My predecessor wrote to all of our schools and higher education settings last year, urging them to crack down on anti-Semitism. In particular, he asked universities to adopt the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition of anti-Semitism. This definition is a vital tool in tackling anti-Semitism because it sends a signal, a very powerful signal, that the university takes these issues seriously. It also enables universities to better understand and recognize anti-Semitism and intolerance when it occurs. The Office for Students plans to publish a list of all the providers that have adopted the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism later this week. Indications are that we can expect a very, very good progress over the last year, and I'm confident more will continue to adopt this definition. Colleagues, I am humbled to stand here before you today. Elie Wiesel, a Holocaust survivor, said that after Auschwitz, the human condition is not the same. Nothing will be the same. He asked us to close our eyes and listen. Listen to the silent screams of terrified mothers, the prayers of anguished old men and women. Listen to the tears of children, Jewish children. Look and listen as they quietly walk towards dark flames, so gigantic that the planet itself seemed in danger. It is for them that we are here today, and for them that we will never allow ourselves to forget. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, State Secretary Nadim Zahawi, for what you said, for your strong words. And I would like to quote you when you signed the Holocaust Trust book, when you said it's crucial that we remember the horrors of the past and honor those who were murdered so we can stay vigilant against allowing such atrocities to ever happen again. Thank you for your strong commitment. I would like to say, before I will invite our next panelist, that beside my responsibilities at the European Jewish Association, reaching out and contacting all the Jewish communities and Jewish organizations, I'm also in charge of the European March of the Living Network. The March of the Living Network is one of the biggest educational programs, and until now, more than 200,000, 60,000 people came to Auschwitz together with high school students, together with college students, also people, adults from all across the world, and especially from Europe. In 2019, I had the privilege to have the first delegation of high school students coming from Oranienburg in Germany, together with the mayor of Oranienburg. And I would like Minister of Education of the Länder of Rhine-Palatin, maybe we can also have delegation coming for your Länder, because I think that this kind of encounters between Jewish high school students and non-Jewish high school students, reflecting on the cause of the Holocaust, could really help us to prevent it in the future. So I would like to call you Dr. Stefanie Höbig and say that you also made very strong commitments about the Holocaust, and also in your position as the chairperson of the Committee of Minister of Education in Germany. So please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, thank you very much for your invitation and for the opportunity to speak here in Krakow about experiences and strategies regarding Holocaust education. This topic is very close to my heart. Tomorrow will be my second visit to Auschwitz, the central place of remembrance of the singular crimes of National Socialists, Germany. I struggle to put in words how this place moves me every time I am here. It reminds us with great power of our obligation before history. The memorial, the museum, and the many places of remembrance in Auschwitz document and reveal the incomprehensible dimension of inhumanity. They remind us of the importance of ongoing, active confrontation with the Holocaust. Auschwitz obliges us as Germans and Europeans never to draw a line under the memory of this time of murderous contempt for humanity. Therefore, remembrance work on public memorial days, but also in our everyday lives and especially in schools, is indispensable. Today's children and young people will be the leaders shaping society tomorrow, 10, 15, 20 years from now. If we want them to have the chance to live in a free and just society, they must know the value of democracy, and thus also their responsibility before history. This is no less important today, more than 76 years after the end of the Second World War. Indeed, it has become even more important, precisely because after such a long time, school children may wonder why they should still remember. And because we must also convey it to those children and young people whose own family history in Germany does not stretch back to that time. For if we do not fight forgetfulness and ignorance, anti-Semitism can find the soil on which it can flourish once again. And it is a bitter fact that unfortunately, even today, there is anti-Semitism in Germany. We must do everything we can to prevent anti-Semitism to gain ground again. This requires the committed action of civil society. But it also requires an education policy that firstly focuses on remembering the terrible crimes of National Socialism, dealing with anti-Semitism, teaching Jewish culture, and its immense contribution to our continent. And that secondly, also comprises a strong civic and democracy education with a European perspective, where students learn about violence prevention in a wider sense, where they learn and experience democratic decision-making processes firsthand, where they learn that diversity is something valuable and nothing to be afraid of, and that tolerance and respect are powerful traits. And I'm very grateful to explain a bit today how we do this. Allow me to report primarily about the specific approaches and experiences of my state, one of 16 in Germany, Rhineland-Palatinate. Holocaust education has played a significant role across school subjects since many years. Nonetheless, in a government statement in January 2019, I emphasized that remembering the crimes of the Nazi dictatorship and critical awareness of our history are fundamental for our country, and that we want to further strengthen this remembrance in our schools. Since then, we have launched a whole new package of measures in my state, including remembrance work as well as civic, democracy, and European education. We modernized and extended activities in these areas in order to find the interest of every new generation of students. We set up 2 new coordination offices to support schools with civic and democracy education and memorial work, such as organizing meetings with contemporary witnesses. We have also determined that every student should deal directly with the history of violence under National Socialism, meaning they should visit a memorial site at least once in their school life or deal with that contemporary witnesses experienced. The state provides and has increased funding for this purpose. In addition, we require all prospective teachers, regardless of the subjects they teach, to visit a memorial site at least once during their teaching training. The ministry supports a wide variety of thematic school projects. Students visit memorials and other learning sites. They delve into the fate of individual people or enter conversation with their descendants. Using sources from local archives, they research, for instance, how the anti-Jewish policies of the National Socialists increasingly escalated in their hometown. To enable them to do all this under professional guidance, we have greatly expanded the corresponding range of teacher training courses and respective partnerships. 2 weeks ago, a group of teachers returned from a 6-day workshop here in Krakow and Auschwitz, and in February, a group will travel to Yad Vashem. In addition, the Ministry of Education, in cooperation with Givat Haviva, is also planning a regular exchange of young people between Israel and Rhineland-Palatinate. At the same time, the Institute, which is responsible for our teacher training courses, is expanding its digital offerings for schools and teachers. This includes, but is not limited to, the extensive documentation of meetings with eyewitnesses and learning materials for the historical search for traces on site. Listening to and hearing from those who suffered from the Nazi regime is certainly one of the most powerful and impactful ways to educate young people about the Holocaust. That is why dealing with digital contemporary witness experiences or institutions such as the Anne Frank Zentrum in Berlin are extremely valuable. They help to build a connection to today's students and their realities of life. In the same way, we support numerous projects from primary school level till high school, focusing on violence prevention, civic and social skills, where students, for instance, learn mutual and self-respect, practice democratic decision-making and peaceful conflict resolution. Moreover, it is very important to me that we focus on the history and culture of Judaism in our schools, on living together in the present, and on the many facets of current anti-Semitism. The Standing Conference of the Ministers of Education and Cultural Affairs, which brings together all the education ministers of the 16 federal states, worked with the Central Council of Jews in Germany to develop a recommendation on how to deal with anti-Semitism in this summer. It emphasized the key role of schools in the fight against misanthropy and for democracy. It starts with education and teacher training, and in addition, it was agreed that students should be given more opportunities to come into contact with Jewish culture. We are glad that Jewish life is taking place in Germany again, that young people, for example, from Tel Aviv are coming to Berlin, that Jewish culture is enriching our country. And we are grateful for all that Jews have given to our country in terms of knowledge, culture, innovation, and so much more over the past 1,000 years. We want to bring this treasure to life. A few weeks ago, I had the honor to present a new student award in my federal state named after Rabbi Leo Trepp, together with his widow Gunda Trepp. It encourages young people to explore the past and present of Jewish culture, religion, and ethics, and to look for traces in their region. Projects encouraging personal encounters are serving a similar, incredibly valuable objective: to bring young people from different faiths together and engage in an open conversation, thus to learn more about Judaism through direct encounter. This, the communication of and the encounter with the diverse Jewish life, is also a special task for my federal state, because the Shum sites of Speyer, Worms, and Mainz in Rhineland-Palatinate have just been added to the UNESCO World Heritage List this summer for their unique ancient Jewish heritage. The monuments and cemeteries of these sites are testimonies to the 1,000-year history of Jews north of the Alps. We want to inform more intensively than ever before about the richness and diversity of Jewish culture from the Middle Ages to the present day, because it is and remains linked to our country, our history, and our culture. Ladies and gentlemen, to summarize, in my view, contemporary Holocaust education needs to be anchored consistently in the curricula, in textbooks, and in new digital teaching and learning opportunities. It also needs culturally sensitive learning settings that take the learning requirements of an increasingly migrant student body seriously. It also needs to be approached in a way that arouses interest, for example, by searching for traces on site, or by dealing with biographies of young people. And it needs knowledge about and sensitivity to Jewish culture and history beyond the Holocaust. It also needs encounters and dialogue with young Jews so that the rich treasure of Jewish life in Germany and Europe becomes even more concrete and visible. I am convinced that we can counter rising anti-Semitism with an education understood and offered in this way, and in doing so, we can strengthen historical critical awareness, democracy, and the European idea. And we must continue to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Stephanie Rubik, for your strong commitment and also for your very holistic approach in your Länder about Holocaust education. Before I will call upon Regina, I would like to quote a very important survey that was presented in our conference, European Jewish Association conference in Brussels last October, about the question measuring the secondary anti-Semitism regarding the frequency of denial and relativization of the importance of Holocaust and Holocaust remembrance. This survey was done in 16 countries. It was exclusively presented at this conference that we organized in Brussels in October. And the survey, it's in somehow alarming and somehow will show us that we have a lot of work to do. The first question was, the number of Jewish victims of the Holocaust was much lower than is usually claimed. It was a question. Do you agree or do you disagree with this question? 11% tend or strongly agree of the European who responded to this survey to this quote, the number of Jews was lower than usually claimed. The second question was, many of the atrocities of the Holocaust were often exaggerated by the Jews themselves. 12% tend to agree to that question, to that remark. The third one was, Jews are also to be blamed for the persecution against them. The Jews are to be blamed for that persecution. 15% of the Europeans who were interviewed said, yes, we agree with that quote. The fourth one was, after so many decades have passed since the persecution of the Jews, the Holocaust should be taken off the public agenda. Already 19% agree with that quote. Then Jews still talk much or too much about the Holocaust. 22% agree with that quote. And when the question was asked, Jews exploit Holocaust for their own purposes, already 21% agree with that quote. So the only maybe light of hope in that survey was when they asked the question, if we must keep the memory of the persecution of the Jews alive, 61% tend or strongly agree with the fact that we must keep the memory of the persecution of Jews alive. And one person who is doing a fantastic work to keep the Holocaust alive is Regina Sulkowski-Slusny. She is an Holocaust survivor. She was an hidden children. And she's regularly visiting schools in Belgium. I cannot even count how many schools. I think that in 2019, you visited more than 200 schools to speak to all the high school students. So you are doing this, and thank you for your work. The floor is yours.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Rav Margolin, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for inviting me. You heard that I'm going to the schools, because when I go to the schools nearly every day, except on Shabbat, Saturday, and Sunday, I realize that not only the children or the students, because I start from 12 years till university, the teachers don't know anything, or nearly anything. And they have to teach about the Holocaust. In Belgium, there was over 25,000 Jewish people taken to where we go tomorrow. 5,000 children. No one came back. 1,200 from the grown-ups came back. But in Belgium, there was 50% of the Jews were saved. And between them, 5,000 children, more or less. There was an organization. They went to the families, telling them, give us your children, from babies from a few days or weeks till 15 years. And all the families, all those mothers, gave the children. Those children, at the end of the war, didn't see their parents coming back. Only a few, because there was only from the 20,000, 1,200 came back. It's a drop in the sea. This is what I'm telling the students, and I tell them my story and that one of my husband. I was a very lucky girl of 2.5. I was hidden with my parents and my two brothers.